Hi, I'm Mark Oppenheimer, and this is my swan song this week, sitting in for Colin McEnroe, who is bicycling through Catholic Europe, as we're calling it, in the days of Pope Francis, when everyone's reclaiming their Catholicism. It's the Colin McEnroe Show, and today we have a really exciting show. This is one I've wanted to do for a really long time, and I'm really grateful that Colin's absence gave me the chance to do it. We're talking about big families, and I'm arbitrarily setting the cutoff for big at 4. Because, or not the cutoff, the starting point, the floor, not the ceiling, at 4, because that's how many children I have. I have 4 daughters, ages 8, 6, 4, and almost 2. And, of course, when I'm around my friends who have 10 kids, and I do know such people, they think, what's 4? That's like nothing. That's a start. But when I'm around normal people in America, where the birth rate is closer to 2, they think, oh, my God, how do you possibly do that? And as it happens, I actually know other people who have 4 or 5. My friend Stuart has 5 kids. My friend Andrew has 4. There's a whole – in New Haven, where I live, I sort of know the community of people who have lots of kids. We like spot each other and wave from our minivans. But I wanted to hear from some other people who had even more kids than me, and I also wanted to hear from listeners. So this is going to be a show where we're going to expect a lot of calls. We want to hear your judgmentalism. We want to hear how we're destroying the environment. We want to hear how this is, bad for water in California and for the Greek economy. You can call us to talk about large families. What do you think of them? 860-275-7266. That's 860-275-7266. We have 4 guests today. We're going to be joined by Vita Marilani, who's an assistant professor of sociology at Yale. She studies family structure. Hi, Vita.
Hi, good to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us from New Haven. Jordana Horn-Gordon is a writer, lawyer, and mother of, as of about a month ago, 6 children. Hi, Jordana.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Rich Calhoun is a high school science teacher in Western Massachusetts and the father of how many kids, Rich?
I have 4.
4.
2 boys and 2 girls.
You mean 4 so far, right?
4 so far.
4 so far. All right. And Megan Francis is a writer and the author of several books, including Table for 8. She is the mother of how many, Megan?
I have 5.
You have so far, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. And probably that's it.
And probably that's it. So thanks so much to all of you for joining us. I want to start with Vita, though. We're going to bring everyone else in really soon. How common can you give us a sense of the sociological breakdown? How does the bell curve fall? What's average in America? What's bizarre?
Right. So I will start by endorsing your view that 4 is uncommon, and more than 4 is uncommon. So, about 15% of parents today have 4 or more kids. It used to be higher, but I will say that that's an anomaly if you take a long-term view of American fertility. Fertility went up, to produce the baby boomers, and then has gone back down. So, often I think people think of this very big fertility norm that was just before our generation, but actually that was unusual. Fertility was lower before that, and so there's this up and then down shape to fertility. If we look from 1900, say, to 2000, Americans are incredibly narrow-minded in what they think the ideal family size is. They think 2 or 3 children are the right number, and so in 1970, about 70% of Americans thought that the ideal family size was 2 or 3, and today, about 75% of Americans think that that's the right number. So I would say relative to other countries, we actually have an extremely homogeneous consensus of what the right family size is, and it's about 2 or 3.
And when did it peak? Do you know what year we had the highest? Go ahead.
Yep. So it peaked for the cohorts of 1935 to 1940. So the baby boomer is the baby boomers were born from 1946 to 1964. So if you kind of think of the 1950s as, the peak, it went up to about a fertility rate of 3 and then came back down to 2.
And what if you go back 100 years? So back to
100 years. Yeah, if you go back 100 years. So if we think about the women born in 1910, say, fertility was lower at about 2.5. An average of 2.5 per woman. And so when we look at the proportion who have 4 kids or more for the 1910 cohort, now I looked up that number, it was 21%. And so, not that high.
So not that high. So they were actually pretty good at birth control. Right? I mean, they knew family planning, didn't they?
They did. I mean, so people have a lot of different ways of doing family planning. I'm suddenly remembering how I talked to my 6-year-old. So
this is the 6-year-olds are off at day camp. We're among grown-ups here. What were they doing? How is it that low?
Well, so I mean, people control fertility both by using contraception and by not having sex when they don't want to get pregnant, and so they can do both.
Is that how it's? Oh my God! Is that how it's done? All right. So thanks for getting us focused on that. So there was an anomalous period after World War II and in the baby boom era, and now we're back down to what people think is fairly normal. Megan, you host a podcast, the Mom Hour, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And I mean, is your qualification for that you have a lot of children? Is that what the podcast is about?
No, it's not.
Or are you just an exceptionally good mom?
I think I'm an experienced mom, and so a lot of people look to me because I have 5 kids and thinks that gives me some kind of superpower or perceptiveness about parenting. To be fair, I don't think I'm any more perceptive than a mom of 1, but I do have a lot of experience and years under my belt and kids under my belt. So, yeah, I think that people tend to look at moms of many or dads of many as sort of these experts because they think we must be incredibly organized or incredibly patient to be able to handle it. And I'm not sure I'm either of those things. But
so that gets to the question of how we're perceived, those of us who have large families. You're talking as if the perception is generally positive. Like, let's go to Megan for advice. She's seen everything. Is it overwhelmingly positive, or is there any negative feedback?
Oh, there's negativity. I think that it goes both ways. I think that people, it's the sinner or saint kind of dichotomy. So you've got some people who think I'm crazy, my house must be completely chaotic, and we're just kind of, living in squalor, and I can't possibly manage all my kids or pay attention to all my kids. You've definitely got those people. They're not the ones who I guess are looking to me for advice, thankfully. And then I've got people who really just kind of think, wow, 5 kids. They kind of think that 5 is 5 times as hard as 1, which has not been my experience, and I'm sure the other people on the show with bigger families would agree. It's not like, it's not like that you just take 1 kid and multiply all the work by however many kids you have, and that's how it works out. It's not quite such a concrete equation in that way, I don't think.
No, I mean, in fact, you have to make the oldest help out a lot and do lots of stuff. I mean, you enslave the older ones, right?
Exactly. And they keep each other company, and so if I've got one of my kids who's bugging me to play with them, I'm like, what did I make you all these brothers for?
Right.
So play with them.
Throw that one around.
In a lot of ways, it takes some of the pressure off, to be honest.
We're talking about large families. We'd love your calls at 860-275-7266. Jordana, how old is your 6th now?
So the 6th is 3 weeks.
My goodness. And boy, girl, give us the breakdown, the boy-girl breakdown.
So my 2 eldest children are boys. They are 11 and 10. And then we have a slew of little girls, one of whom has been almost 4, according to her, for several months. But now it's actually almost 4 next week. Then one who turns 3 in October, one who turns 2 in October, and then this most recent one.
Now, you're a writer. You write for the parenting website Kveller.com. Right. The Yiddishists among us will know that's Kveller, Kveller.com. And you've been writing since you had a mere 2 children, actually. And I'm curious, like, have you noticed how the perceptions of your growing family, which you write about and which you write about on Facebook and which you tweet about, how they've changed as it's gone from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6? Like, did people who were like cool with you having 4 all of a sudden find that their heads exploded at 5 and 6?
Yes. I carry a lot of wipes in my bag just to wipe up the debris from the exploded brains all around me. I definitely. The perception, the reactions to each subsequent announcement of pregnancy were very different. 3, oh, that's wonderful. 4, it's going to be a big family. 5, what is happening? And 6 was like, you have gone off the deep end. And I found that reaction actually came mostly from my fellow parents who would say, like, why? Why would you do that? And as Megan said, the idea, like, I'm going nuts and I have 2 kids.
Right.
So,
right. Do you have any favorite reactions? Like, is there one that you whip out at dinner parties? Let me see. I don't know. Someone once conjectured that, it was to have, spares around for, I don't know, organs and I thought that was extremely odd. But I'm only thinking of it now. Not one favorite. No, I think that generally they can be classified into 2 camps. The ones who say, that's great, better you than me, or why? Right.
Why would you do that?
I would add in another. I mean, one reaction that I know Sid and I get, my wife and I, is the not uncommon reaction of people who have 2 or 3 who say, "God, I wish we'd had more."
Oh, interesting.
We get that not infrequently.
I've only found that actually it's only just started now, because now I have some friends who maybe their first child just finished high school, and they say, they're struggling with what they are, how they're going to redefine their lives without a present child in the house, and they think, well, you have some job security.
Right. You'll never have to. It's a long time before you lose. My parents had my last sibling. I'm one of 4. When my mom was 44. Hi, Mom. And up in Springfield. And, they didn't have to worry about what next until they were 62. I mean, they were teaching a 16-year-old to drive at 60. So it was,
right.
It put off those questions about Act 3, as the gerontologists call it. Mr. Calhoun, if I may call you that, even though you're on vacation from teaching at a high school. You have 4 kids, right?
Oh, we have 4 kids. We have a daughter who's 7, a son who's 5, a daughter who is 3, and a son who was born in March.
Oh, congratulations! So, how did you guys reach the decision? Was that one of those things where your eyes locked on Match.com and you both wanted 4 kids someday, or was this an evolving decision?
It was certainly an evolving decision. We both came from families of 4, but we actually were told by a fertility specialist after our first. We had fertility help with all of our children. With our first 2. And our son was born with in vitro fertilization. Our first son, and then the next 2 we were told were miracle babies. They were not planned, but certainly we were excited to see them and meet them. But we thought we were done at 2, and so we're pleasantly surprised with 3, and kind of bowled over by number 4.
That's great. So one of the people in pop culture who's staking a claim for those of us with lots of kids is the comedian Jim Gaffigan, who's the father of 5. And he does a stand-up routine, I think, that was back when he had only 4. And let's listen to it now.
I recently became a father. Thank you. Became a father for the 4th time. Never as much applause on that part. Really no applause, right? Because after the 3rd kid, people stop congratulating you. Then they just treat you like you're Amish. 4? Well, that's one way to live your life. Can you build us one of those wood fireplaces? 4 kids. 4 kids. If you want to know what it's like to have a 4th, just imagine you're drowning, and then someone hands you a baby.
All right. So what a great moment to go to a phone call. Mike, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
All right, Mike, what's up?
Well, I'm listening to your topic here, and it just reminded me of a very funny story. I used to teach aquatic exercise at a local hospital, and it was mostly seniors, and I had this elderly lady from down south, and she mentioned she had 30 children.
30?
And I didn't believe it until she brought in all the pictures and named them right off the bat. And, in fact, she had a wonderful Southern accent. The way she said it was, I had them 5 and 6 at a time. She never had less than twins. One husband.
Wow. And is that...
Wow.
How many kids do you have, Mike?
Myself, I'm single.
All right. Well, there's time yet. We wish you however many kids you want.
I'm looking for a fertile woman. Thank you very much.
All right. Fertile women, call Mike. He's Mike at Mike.com. All right. Thanks so much, Mike. Good talking to you. There's a question for us so we could hand off to Megan. I mean, you're at 5. Do you meet people, not necessarily with 30, but with 8 or 10, and then feel like, does that feel like relatively, I don't have so many?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like every time, I get any kind of cred for having 5 and then I meet someone with 6, it's like, oh, well, I guess I don't really know what I'm talking about that much. But, and up, of course. I actually know kind of a lot of people with 6, surprisingly, but not as many with 7 and 8. I don't know why. 6 seems to be it's like the craziness drop-off point or something, where then you move into a completely different level.
Yeah, I could name a bunch with 5, and I don't know any with 6. Jordana, do you keep that mental list of people who have even more than you or as many as you?
I'm looking. I'm always looking. I'm connected with a few virtually, but I have to say that in my community, which is, it's a suburb of New York City, there really are very, very few and far between. Maybe a few blended families. But that was how things ended up. But I find that in a lot of those, the children are older, maybe out of the house, and so it's a sort of different animal.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now your first two are from a first marriage, as you've written about, and the other four are from the second marriage so far. And,
from
the second.
We're here for good.
You're here for good. Okay.
We're both hard sells at this point.
Okay.
So.
like the remarriage market wouldn't treat you well with four kids between 6 and 4. So, how did the conversation go? And I'm curious with all of you about this, like with the spouses. I mean, Rich has already told us that he and his wife, worked hard with science to get the first two, and then we're very grateful for the second. I'm curious, Jordana, and then maybe Megan, you could talk about how that decision went.
Well, from even my husband and I met online through online dating, and in our very first phone call, he asked me if I would, I had these two little boys, and he asked me if I'd be willing to have more children. And I said, why don't we just see how dinner goes first? I can't agree. I said, we can talk about it over dessert. And so apparently it went well. It's snowballed. I maybe it's because I'm so tired. I don't actually recall the moment of decision of having any of these people. But I know that we talked about wanting a big family, and to me, big. I'm one of 4 also, like you, and I wanted ideally to have at least 4. But I don't know. I guess we were having fun, and so it just kept on going.
And Megan, how did that conversation go for you and your husband, if there was one that you can remember?
Yeah. Well, gosh, in our case, there wasn't as much deciding. It just kind of happened most of the time. We got married really young, and I came from both of my parents had 5 siblings in each of their families, and then I had 4, and then some step siblings and things. So I was just used to having a lot of kids. My husband came from a family of 3, and I think ideally that maybe would have been where he would have thought he would have stopped. But I always kind of knew I wanted 4 or 5. It just, the timing and spacing wasn't, really all that planned. But, I did feel like when we got to 4, I thought, I don't think I'm quite done. And then when we got to 5, I felt more done. And I also I could see how having more kids was just kind of extending the length of time that I was going to be in the trenches, you know, and I was kind of ready to start moving out of those trenches. Right. But I could see if it just was about the number of people I want around my table, I could just have kept going on into infinity because I love being surrounded by people.
You like having a big table. No,
yeah, I love it.
And I've written about this too, and I've always said, one of the things is that it is this hedge against loneliness, right? That, there are these people who love you a lot and whom you love who are around. And, right now, one of my eldest daughters off at summer camp for 4 weeks, but I got 3 more. So it still feels like there's a lot of love. And that's without even counting the dogs who really love me. Dogs love you.
And my siblings are some of my best friends, and so I love the knowing that my kids will have that when they get older too, hopefully. And they all like each other a lot now, so hopefully that lasts into adulthood.
I want to take a quick phone call that I think maybe Vita can help us with before we go to break. Nathaniel from Hamden, are you there, sir?
Yes.
Yeah, quickly, what was your question?
Hey, I think one of your guests had spoken to the trends in the U.S. related to how we're kind of in a waning period of having larger families, but previously it was higher and it's lower. And I was wondering how that applies to other cultures or countries, whether Europe aligns with us or not, where we fall within that.
It's a great question. Vita, quickly, where do we fall relative to other countries?
Well, so relative to other rich countries, the Western European nations, we have higher fertility. So there's what's called very low fertility in many of the social democracies in Europe, and in Italy and in Spain and in Sweden, people worry about fertility being too low, whereas in the U.S. and France, we sit at about 2, which is what demographers like me call replacement fertility. The population stays the same there. Obviously, it's a lot lower. Our fertility is a lot lower than other developing nations, where the averages are more in the 3 to 5 range. But so I would say our fertility is high for a rich nation, but pretty ho-hum.
And
compared
we're
to
helped
other developing
we're helped
nations.
by immigration, right?
We are helped by immigration, but I think it's really important to remember that Americans pretty much hold a high value of about 2 kids. So this is not a case in which, the immigrants are having a lot of kids and the native-borns are having 1.
Right.
We don't have that kind of society.
We have to go to a break, but when we come back, we'll take more of your calls. We're talking about big families. It's 860-275-7266.
I say, baby, why stop there? Let's have a great big family, like them old photographs you see. Well, that could be you and me, and a great big family.
What do you think when you see someone with more than 4 children?
In our family, there were 5 children. I know now families tend to be a little smaller, although I read recently that more educated people are starting to have bigger families. I think it's a good thing. I know it can be a difficult thing in that they may be deprived of certain things. But now that I'm older, I can see that a lot of times you may not have a lot of other people in the world that it's good to have some siblings. A lot of times, even if it's a sister or brother, you hate them for a day or 2, and then you're, back together again.
I wonder how they can pay for it. I raised 2 children, so it's surprising to me in this economy that people would have that many children.
What do you think prompts people these days to have more than 4 children?
I'm sure they have personal reasons, maybe religious reasons. Maybe they came from large families themselves. I don't know.
What on earth prompts people to do it? They must have personal reasons. Probably they do. I'm Mark Oppenheimer, sitting in for Colin McEnroe on the Colin McEnroe Show. We're talking about big families. We're taking your calls at 860-275-7266. Are you from a big family? Did you love it? Are you from a big family and you couldn't stand it? I know one woman who is one of 7 children, and none of those 7 as adults have had any kids. So maybe that's some reflection on their own experience growing up in big families. 860-275-7266. We're talking with Vita Marilani from the Sociology Department at Yale, Jordana Horn-Gordon, writer and mother of 6, the very robustly named Rich Calhoun, who must coach a few things with a name like that. He's a science teacher at Deerfield Academy in Massachusetts and the father of 4. Megan Francis, who is the mother of 5 and author of Table for 8, and also hosts the blog The Mom Hour. And we're talking about big families. I have a question that I'll throw at Rich, which is, you live in a residential community, a boarding school, where you see how other parents do their parenting. Do you think that when you compare yourself, say, to the parents of 1 or 2, do you parent differently?
I think so. I think my wife and I both teach full time, and the school allows us to have split schedules where the children often they feel like batons in some sort of relay, where one of us will be running through the door and kind of catch a baby while the other one is running out to work. And I think a lot of the parents that I see, and we have 52 ninth grade girls who live with us in the dorm, so we see lots of different kids and take care of lots of different kids. I think having a larger family spreads us a little bit thinner, but I think our days are a little bit more full. And not that they're better, they're just from sunup to sundown, life goes really, really quickly. And that's something I think we both very much enjoy.
So there's less time for you guys to browse the internet aimlessly than for some of your friends.
And less time to chat with each other. So
right.
we're in some days we feel like we're ships passing in the night, but we have our summers together as a family. And so I think if it weren't for those summers together, I think we probably would have gone with a smaller family. But we have that luxury as teachers to have 3 months kind of uninterrupted together as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Jordana, how has having all those kids affected, I would say, your parenting, and I would also say your marriage, because Rich brings that up?
In terms of parenting, I think that you really can't sweat the smallest stuff as much with this many children. I've written about, how when you're in the supermarket and you see someone with the cover for the seating area of the shopping cart and their child in there, and you think, okay, I can't be worried about that. I can't be worried that you're going to lick the shopping cart. The chances are really good you're going to lick the shopping cart, and you might throw up, and we're going to get through it. It's going to be okay. So you can't be so tense about things. You need to be much more organized. Sadly, that is not my nature, and so this has really been a lesson for me, because I think that if 3 children is juggling, I think that 6 is really more like air traffic control, and you're trying to avert disaster and forgetting someone in a parking lot somewhere. And so it necessitates a degree of organization, a degree of the let-it-go kind of mentality, and also strongly encouraging your children to be as self-sufficient and independent as possible, because not only does it behoove them, but it certainly behooves you.
One of the things that I know often gets let go, at least in my household, is things like lawn care, for example. And our neighbor Holly, who has 4 children, she's famous in the neighborhood for saying, "We're raising children, not grass." That it just like the hedges aren't going to be as nicely trimmed. Megan, are you an organized person?
I've become more organized from necessity, but no. And my nature is not to be particularly organized. So, and I think to what Jordana was saying, I mean, people will tell me all the time how self-sufficient my kids are and how impressed they are that they can do things for themselves. And I really can't exactly take credit for that. It was probably more a little benign neglect on my part, and then they had to sort of figure it out. I don't think that's a bad thing.
Right. No, I mean, our 1-year-old can open the refrigerator and take out her sippy cup and start drinking.
Yeah.
Like, she just doesn't wait because she's learned that she can ask and nag us, but we're just not going to get to it. And
yeah, I feel like there was like a 10-year period of time where I was kind of stuck on the couch nursing a baby like all the time. And so the older kids just kind of thought, well, I guess we have to learn how to make an egg, make a sandwich, figure out where our stuff is. I mean, they just didn't rely on me for that kind of thing.
Give ourselves baths and hopefully not drown. I want to take a call. We have a call from Michael in Lawrence. Michael, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, and you're from a family of how many, sir?
12.
12. Okay. What was that like?
Well, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful.
You know what, Michael? Disrespect us. It's okay. It's okay. We're all grown-ups here.
Well, I hate to rain on the pronatalism love fest, but coming from a family of 12, most of my brothers and sisters don't even have kids. A lot of the time it was kids raising kids. There was physical abuse in the house because of the stress my mother was under. I mean, look, there are racing class issues here too. If you have a nice suburban middle class, high income, you might be able to have 4 to 6 kids and be in La La Land. But, if you're considering all the single parents, people that don't have the money, in this economy, in this world, bringing kids into this world, with the college tuition and everything like that is stress. And the one thing that's left out here is the stress that, being under. And I had one biological daughter and I adopted one. Mm-hmm. Like I said, most of my brothers and sisters, I'd say 10 out of the 12 don't even have kids. So there's a side of this that's not even being discussed. It's totally being left out.
Michael,
I just want to raise that.
Well, and thank you for raising that. I'm really grateful for that because I think that's a terrific point. And it's actually great that we have Vita here because to what extent is there a class component? Do we know if a lower socioeconomic, lower income family is more likely to have 3 or 4 kids versus a richer family? How does that break down at all? What do we know about that?
Right. Yeah, you couldn't see me, but I was nodding at my head as he was asking his question. I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying, actually. So I guess I have 3 things I want to put on the table. One is he's right to say that having large families is largely associated with having lower socioeconomic status, and that the kinds of experience that the moms and dads on this show right now are talking about is in some ways allowed by having flexible jobs and enough money between the 2 parents to allow for flexible schedules. So I think we should acknowledge that. The other thing I'll add, though, is there's also a lot of stigma associated with having a lot of kids when you're poor. and that what we might think of as a big family might actually depend on people's economic means, right? So we might think that someone who's a single parent who has 3 kids has a lot of kids, whereas I think it would be very unlikely for a middle-class woman with 3 kids to be judged that way. There's also, I think, quite a bit of stigma actually against being childless and having only one child. So we can stigmatize people a lot of different ways and manage to do that.
And I should say, by the way, that I would love to do another show on people who have 0 or 1 kids, let's say, or childless by choice, or as sometimes they call themselves now, child-free, because they think childless sounds derogatory, sounds like a put down. Peter out there in virtual land, he tweets, "I've always asserted that I can barely take care of myself, let alone 1 or 10 kids." Peter, I'm sure you're right about that. Don't have kids. Sarah tweets, "My wife is the youngest of 4, and she's sure she wants only 1. She felt forgotten and like an afterthought." And to Sarah, I'd only say I was the eldest of 4, which was actually worked out great for me because I had a few years where there were no others. But yeah, being the youngest is probably different than being older. And Christina tweets, "Could your guests discuss the finances of having lots of kids, big houses, plans for college costs, and so forth?" That's actually exactly what I was going to ask, and that's thanks to Michael's really good call. And by the way, Michael, we're so glad you're listening up there in Lawrence, Massachusetts. It's always good to be heard up in the north of Boston area. I should come clean and say that we have enough money that we don't worry about things like the groceries or even getting babysitters to get some time alone, but there's no way we'll be able to pay for college of more than 1. And we've always joked we have to figure out who the smartest is and send that one to college. But that's where we stand. College is absolutely off the table. Jordana, are you rich?
I mean, so we're at a point where I will say that my unusual, or I guess not unusual, seeing as how maybe one of your guests can speak as to whether or not actually 50% of Americans get divorced. But the fact of the matter is that meeting and marrying later in life, when my husband and I were at points in our respective careers where we had more financial security, has been a comfort now. And the fact that that happens to coincide with my unexpectedly cooperative fertility has been a pleasure as well. And that's so. Do I feel incredibly lucky? Absolutely,
yeah.
I do. And it's a set of circumstances that have fallen into a row. And that being said, we do often joke about, one day sitting the kids down at a table and spinning some sort of roulette wheel as to, who will go to college. And we talk about also the fact that, we often cite the example of, say, Mark Zuckerberg, you don't have to finish college,
You just found a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Right,
Bill Gates didn't finish college. We've never tried that one in the Oppenheimer household. I'm absolutely going to try that one.
Yes.
Hey, so Rich, and you of course, you have free housing, so that helps.
We do. Part of our job is living in the dorm. And so I think if we, I think your caller made a very good point. If we weren't in this very special situation that we're in terms of our job expectations, there's no possible way we could afford to have a larger family.
Right.
We feel very lucky. Although, we plan to become boarding school teachers. That's what both of us have done since college. So we set out knowing that we would live at our school likely for the rest of our lives.
Right. I want to take another call. Rasan, am I pronouncing it correctly from Cromwell?
Yeah, Rasan, thanks a lot for taking my call.
What's up?
I grew up with 3 siblings. There were 4 of us actually in 5 years, and I have 4 biological kids from my first marriage, and I'm now remarried, and my wife and I have decided to expand our family so we could have assuming at least 1 or possibly 2, and our my personal my comment is more around as long as I was healthy and able to have fun with them and continue to grow with them and could afford them, I think having kids is absolutely the most fun thing in the world. I love watching my kids grow together. I love watching them play together, and I think one of your panelists, we're fortunate that they get along very well.
Right.
But I couldn't imagine only having 1 and constantly being the center of their attention.
Right. Well, thanks for the call. I really appreciate that. And I'm really glad that you brought up the question of fun. I mean, one of the things that I think allows my wife and I to be so positive about having 4 kids that we really do find parenting to be a pleasure. And in fact, we tend to look down. There's a whole genre of parenting writing that involves writing books. There's some novels. There's also nonfiction about sort of how unbelievably stressful or how unbelievably torturous it is to have children, how it destroys your marriage, how it drains your resources. And no question, but if we felt that way, we wouldn't have as many. And, Megan, do you find that often you're correcting the misperception or that you're putting out there the correct perception that parenting is actually a joy?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's kind of what I've actually based most of my writing career on is just kind of countering those impressions of parenting. And I wanted to talk a little bit to address the caller who came from a family of 12.
Right.
Because I think the alarm bells that were going off in my mind when he was talking is it sounds kind of like, and I, of course, I don't have any idea what his family background was, but when I hear about people who were sort of a slave to their fertility and wound up with these huge families that they didn't intend to have or maybe thought that they wanted but then ended up in this stressful situation, I think that's completely different than what we're talking about. And not having kids because I'm like part of a natalist movement, and I want everyone else to do the same thing. For me, this is a personal thing, and I think my kids are great, and we have a lot of fun as a family. But if you don't think parenting, if you don't like large groups, you maybe aren't going to like having a big family. And if you just really, if you're in a phase of life where having more than 2 would be incredibly stressful for you financially or in whatever way there might be, then maybe that's not the right choice for you. It's very personal.
Right.
And very independent and individual.
Jordana, do you like large groups?
I do. I always have. But I will say, to me, what resonated with that caller was the idea of stress. Do I enjoy kids? My own, sure, yes. But that being said, I gotta say that with this many kids, there's always something to worry about, and there's always something to be anxious about, and that is, it's a question of how you deal with it, and it's something that, truthfully, I'm still trying to do. You can worry about one of your kids being unhappy in a new school. You can worry about and just magnify and multiply that times 6. And there's always something that can keep you up at night, perhaps literally if it's screaming, or perhaps, just in terms of your thoughts,
right,
and wanting the best for these children. So it is a lot, and it is very stressful. And I think that we do each other a disservice by just saying, yes, it's fun and wonderful, and it is fun and wonderful, and it has an underbelly of being extremely tiring and all-consuming.
And I would add that, for some families, it's probably exactly the wrong decision because what brings them together as a couple or what gives them pleasure as a single person, a single parent, maybe, travel, for example, or it may be, year-round, twice-a-week soccer. I mean, there are things that some people enjoy doing that give them meaning and purpose that are not compatible with having lots of children, where you just can't get away as much as you would like. I mean, my wife and I joke that we don't like travel unless it's to our sofa to watch HBO. And so that makes us, that's an advantage if you're going to have lots of kids. We're talking about very large families. I'm Mark Oppenheimer sitting in for Colin McEnroe. We're about to go to a break, but when we get back, we want more of your calls at 860-275-7266.
And he's going to the top. They don't get along, but they're going strong. One big happy family. They don't get along, but they're going strong. One big happy family.
Today's show was produced by Betsy Kaplan and me, Kyone Wolf, with help from our interns Deborah Timms, Katie McAuliffe, and Jules Lefevre. Our executive producer is Katie Tolarski. The part of Bill Curry was played by Jim Gaffigan. For articles, photos, and to listen to previous shows, visit our website, wnpr.org/Colin. On tomorrow's show, Colin is back with the nose. And now, back to Oppie.
Good to be back. I'm Mark Oppenheimer sitting in for Colin McEnroe. We're talking about big families, 4 and more, as we're defining big. We're taking your phone calls at 860-275-7266. We have 4 terrific guests with us and a very active Twitter sphere today. Mara tweets, my father had 5 more kids with his second wife. He was 40 when started, 50 when last was born. Here I should say that my grandfather was married 6 times, but he only had kids with 2 of the wives. So there were 5 kids total. But yes, multiple marriages definitely come into play. Megan made the point of saying, and this is Megan Francis, who's the author of Table for 8 and host of the Mom Hour. Megan made the point of saying she's not part of some natalist cult. I'm assuming that all 3 of my parenting guests are philosophically okay with birth control. Does anyone want to – am I wrong about that?
I'm super okay with it.
You're all super okay with it. Okay. So no one here is having lots of kids because they believe that God forbids otherwise. But Jordana, you have written about a religious impulse for having a large family.
Yes, not in the sense of be fruitful and multiply, but I am a strongly identifying Jew, and for me, it's very important. I feel that I really want to not only to have children for my own personal reasons, but also it's very important to me to raise Jewish children. I feel very lucky to be part of a heritage that's very important to me, and I want to convey a sense of that importance to these children. And I feel very grateful to have the ability to have them.
And, you know, that's in some ways the exact opposite of the feeling that some people have, going back to that caller, Michael, who I don't know why his mother had 12 children, but there are people who have lots of children because it's beyond their control, because their culture commands it or their religion commands it, and they do it. In a sense, they're choosing it, but maybe it wasn't the right choice for them in terms of family happiness or keeping their stress down. And my guests today are making it an affirmative choice. Megan, do you feel that? How do you feel about what your number of children does for either your community of origin or the town you live in? I mean, we have a tweet from Peter in which he says more people on this planet drain resources, whether first world or third world country. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I've gotten really nasty mail over the years accusing me of draining resources. And, it's all relative. And I think that we can all find something to get upset about, whether it's a celebrity who jets back and forth from coast to coast a few times a week in, their private plane, or whether it's somebody who steals water from a fire hydrant in California during a drought, or,
Tom Selleck, apparently, according to today's news.
Apparently so. And I feel like in the grand scheme of things, living in a country that's barely at replacement rates, my little family of 5 kids is not really making the impact that is being, I don't really feel like there's enough of us doing this to be making an overall huge impact. And, I'm not a social scientist and I'm not a scientist, so I could be wrong about that. But I feel like we all are making individual choices every day about the way we interact with our community. And, we live in a small town where we walk a lot and we don't, use a lot of resources and we all cram into a very normal-sized house. So I feel like it's really relative, and I feel like that's a little bit of a red herring, to be honest.
Vita Marilani from Yale University, is that a rigorous way of thinking about it, or are you cringing?
No, I think she's good. I think she's absolutely right. I think, once we look at the percent of the population that has more than 5 children, we're up at lower than 1%. And so I tend to agree. Can I add, though, one thing that's really interesting for me is that I think it's interesting what gets judged as a, quote, big family, depending on where you are and what you do. So in my world, in the academy and my doctor friends, 3 is considered a big family. And I often hear my friends get judged for sending their kids to daycare too young, having too much babysitting and nanny help, and people raising eyebrows at 3. And so one thing I think it's really interesting in thinking about what's too big is what people give up in how many kids they choose to have, right? So in my case, on school photo day, I might have a babysitter come do my daughter's hair because I'm in D.C. giving a talk. And there are other moms out there who would cringe at that. But that's a trade-off I have to make in my life.
Can I just say, if you had 4 kids, nobody would be doing your daughter's hair on school photos. I think I'm not the only one listening to that thinking, wait, your daughter's hair gets done extra special on school photo day? Like,
it does.
My daughters are lucky to get to school. I mean...
But I guess, what's interesting in my world is what people actively ask, are you really going to have a 3rd kid? Is that really okay?
Well, your world is crazy. That's just crazy.
No. I mean, I think my world is another world in which mothers exist, just like the mothers on your show. But I just think it's interesting to think about, what's big? Is 4 big? Is 6 big? Is 3 big? Well, it sort of depends on how you're going to use this finite amount of time you have in your day.
On what your community is. I want to go to Sandy from New London, who's been very, very patient. Sandy, what's up?
Hi. I just wanted to share that our family is a blended family, and it's difficult to figure out how you're going to pay for college. And what we did was the eldest, we paid for college for her, and then as she graduated, she had to be willing to put some of her future money into the college fund.
Now, wait, how did you
sibling.
wait, hold on. How are you going to enforce that? Did she have to sign a contract before she moved into her freshman dorm?
Actually, she did.
Whoa.
But it wasn't a lot. We asked her to pay for 15% of what we gave her would come back to her sibling, the next sibling in line.
That's really...
And then each sibling after that had to do the same thing. All our kids graduated, and all of them lived up to their contract.
That's really neat. All right, well, thanks for that call. I really appreciate it. My neighbor Gigi from New Haven, how are you?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Good, how are you? What's going on?
Good. I just wanted to talk of the previous caller who was from a family of 12. I come from a family of, I'm one of 9, and I have 5 children myself. And I just wanted to say that all of us, from my siblings, most of us have children, by choice, and we're all very happy being parents. And growing up, it wasn't like the dog-eat-dog world that everyone would imagine in a family of 9. We all looked out for each other. We all cared for each other. We didn't have everything we wanted. We didn't have probably everything we needed, but at the same time, we were able to manage with what we had, and it has made us extremely, extremely successful in our adult life.
I love your comment, and I'm gonna take that comment and put it to our callers, our panelists today, because I am curious, how do you consciously parent all these kids, right? Because everyone knows who has even 2 kids that the first may be jealous of the second. And I'd love to ask each of you quickly, Jordana and then Megan and Rich, how do you think about what happens, what are you doing to the other kids when you have another? Jordana?
Well, I think that for me it's been remarkably and surprisingly positive. We just brought home, as you know, a new baby from the hospital 3 weeks ago. And in many other families that I know, there's a lot of drama that goes around with a new baby coming in the house. And here I'm not entirely sure everybody noticed. I'm joking, obviously, but the fact of the matter is that it hasn't changed really things for anyone. It's been a pleasant surprise. There's been no acting out because they understand that my attention is very rarely laser focused on one particular person, but rather it's a cumulative operation.
Right. You give them siblings, not attention. That's what we That's what we tell our kids. Megan, what about you? How has the parenting played out? What challenges have there been in that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there are things that I'm not able or willing at this point to do for my kids that other people with smaller families can. Like Jordana was just saying, I feel like it's led to just a much less drama-filled experience in our household than maybe people would think. And overall, I feel like everyone just knows we're all in this together. If I had to say, that's what kind of sums up my family. Everyone is willing to pitch in because we're part of a unit, and I can't take all the credit for that. It's just kind of how it's played out. But maybe they're seeing that modeled by my husband and I, where we just do things for each other because we're a family, and sometimes that means you have to be patient, and sometimes that means you have to help out. And it's just, I don't know. I don't want to put too shiny of a
No, I mean, sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah,
Rich,
it works out.
Rich, is yours a drama-filled existence, or are there parenting strategies that have just quickly in the last 30 seconds?
I think drama is part of every family, but when you have more kids, you distribute that drama a little bit, and you have enough attention and energy for all of them as best you can, and then at night you put your head down and wake up in the morning and try and do it again.
Maybe watch some TV first. I'm really grateful to all my guests, Vita Marilani, Jordana Horn-Gordon, Rich Calhoun, and Megan Francis. The calls keep coming. You can share your thoughts with us by emailing Colin@WNPR.org or tweeting us at WNPR Colin. We're grateful to all our guests on the show about big families. Colin will be back tomorrow with The Nose. I'm Mark Oppenheimer, about to go home to at least a couple of my kids. Thanks so much.
You're my brother, you're my sister.
one big family.